This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 283.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
Mr. Barkhad, welcome back to the show. It's been what, 5 years?
Yeah.
We've talked since, but you're back on the show for the first time in 5 years. You were on show 6. I would highly advise everyone to not listen to that because I was a rookie and I was fumbling a lot. So I hope you felt differently, but okay, welcome back to the show, man.
Thank you. Glad to be back. I saw you from the beginning, and now it's, I think, episode 260, 270.
Your episode will be 283.
283. Wow. So,
it's been a while.
It's been definitely a while. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, for those who cannot go back and listen to show 6, do you mind just reviewing who you are and what you do?
Sure. So right now, my current role, I'm a sales engineer. I've been a sales engineer. Next year, it's going to be 10 years in sales engineering.
Okay.
Right now, specifically, I'm a specialist within Google Cloud, focusing on networking. I've been in Google it's been close to 3 years now. And then before that, I was with Cisco for about 6.5 years as a sales engineer in various roles, in generalist roles, specialist roles, public sector, large enterprise. So sales engineering has been primarily the majority of my career. Before sales engineering, I was a support engineer for about 3 years, and that's where we talked about my transition from support to sales engineering.
Oh.
And then before that, I worked in co-op and other smaller different roles, but primarily sales engineering and some support can kind of summarize my career.
Yeah, you and I met because we worked for the same company. You were second layer support, I was third layer support. But I think you and I met at basketball.
Yes, I remember clearly. I remember clearly. You're hard to not forget. You're hard.
Thank you. Hard to miss, yeah.
You're hard to miss, yeah.
Awesome. Well, okay, so you mentioned a lot of things here: generalist, specialist, public sector, large enterprise, a couple of different sales engineer roles. You were never technically called a sales engineer, though, right?
No.
What was your title, or what is your title?
So right now, in Cisco, I was called a systems engineer, and then I went from a systems engineer to a consulting systems engineer, and then I went into enterprise systems architect, which is kind of more of a senior systems engineer. They changed the engineer term to architect. So in Cisco, it was from systems engineer to consulting systems engineer, which is a specialist, to enterprise systems architect. Google refers to systems engineers as customer engineers. So when I joined Google, I was a generalist, but they call it a pod customer engineer, pod CE, where you're in a team of other sales engineers and you cover a particular, Google's very vertical focused. So I was covering basically retail and CPGs. And so now I'm also a customer engineer, but I'm a networking specialist customer engineer. So I'm an overlay specialist to the pod CEs. They can bring me in as a resource specifically for networking. And then I come in and I support them on various engagements. So I cover all of Central from Illinois all the way down to Texas and Minneapolis and other areas as well.
And that's not industry focused, that's technology focused, networking.
Yes, exactly. Technology focused.
What is CPGs?
Consumer packaged goods. It's kind of like it's within, people sometimes call it retail, but it's like the actual manufacturing company versus
And when we say retail, we're talking like big companies, like could be Gap or something, not mom and pop shops.
Yeah, like Ulta Beauty, larger retail.
Okay. And I have so many questions about Google and being a networking specialist specifically, but we have a lot to cover, really. Between public sector, large enterprise, and now, well, is retail considered large enterprise?
It's considered enterprise here. So the enterprise term is actually different in Cisco and Google. So in enterprise and Cisco, they consider it like the largest accounts. They call it
Yep.
enterprise.
Yep.
But in Google, the largest accounts are called select, and enterprise are what's called considered in Cisco. They would consider it commercial select, more commercial select accounts, but in Google we call it enterprise. So the terminology is a little bit different, but I would say is commercial, the larger commercial accounts. It's not like the top accounts, not like one of our largest accounts, Ford, that's select.
But it's not transactional.
But
Like
it's not.
it's still relationship.
It's still
It's just
relationship.
the size is different.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
okay, all right. So between public sector, large enterprise, and retail, I guess, what has been your preference, or how? Maybe we shouldn't ask about preference because that could change. What is the difference then, in your opinion, between the three of them in terms of the
Um,
SE's role?
so public sector, and was when I was in Canada. It was federal government and municipal government, and I would say it's a lot more RFP based. Everybody has a shop, but technically you still develop relationships with the customer. And it's like a lot of times it's one big RFP, and they'll make their decision, and it's less kind of like transactions. It's more of a larger kind of transactional model and more RFP based. Um, Enterprise, when I was in enterprise in Cisco, that was like the largest accounts, right? So they would spend anywhere from 30, 40 million, $50 million with us. So it was highly strategical. So I covered enterprise as a generalist. So when I was a generalist, I only had two customers. So I would be on site typically at least once a week, building the relationship from engineering level all the way up to director level. I was their main go-to guy across the board, and as a specialist, I supported those people that had one or two accounts, right? But I would have a larger patch, and I would be focused on one particular technology. So enterprise was in Cisco was very relationship driven, and so we were very close. We were almost an extension of the company. We would only have two or three accounts, and it was a very close relationship. Um, in Google, in the enterprise is more, I would say, like as I mentioned in Cisco, they call it commercial select, where I would have like maybe 10 accounts. There was two or three that were more strategical, that they're more strategic, but I would have like up to 10 accounts as a CE. And Google's very much team focused, so I would have a team number. So as an enterprise Cisco SE, I would be on my own number for that particular account.
Okay.
But in Google, it's very much a team number. So I would have a team number. So it's not only my success, but the success of my team. So because of that, we were very team oriented. But retail is a fun patch, and we had in Google, we have a lot of success in retail, and we have a lot of solutions in retail. So it was always exciting conversations. I got to work with digital native retail customers that were like pushing the envelope in data and analytics and MLAI. So I learned a lot. I learned so much. A lot of times I was in over my head, and I would bring in specialists, and just like any other kind
Yep.
of generalist. Retail is a very fun patch because you can kind of see like their e-commerce platform. You can see your innovations directly impacting business with them, and we had a good relationship with them, obviously through the Google Ads. So a lot of times we've had that allowed us to have a good relationship with them in the cloud. A lot of those customers, they'll give
Yeah.
us the opportunity, and we had a lot of success. So yeah, we hit. I did very well in retail in Google. That's where I would say I had some of the most success in my career.
Yeah. Just taking a note here because I have so many questions for you. All right. Something you said, team number versus your own number. They were talking about quota, right?
Yeah.
When you have your own number, usually it matches the salesperson, right?
Yes.
And when you have a team number, it's a team of salespeople again, right?
Yes.
So you mentioned for the federal government, at least in Canada, it's all RFP based. So I've worked with the government of Canada a little bit, and it was RFP based, but they would engage us early, and we'd help build the RFP. So, can you just dig into this a little bit? I mean, it's all RFP based, but it takes a lot of work. It's not just
No,
They put in an RFP and then you respond and the deal is won, right?
100%, 100%. And a lot of times, if you find out of an RFP, you already you probably already lost
Yeah.
deal, right? So if you weren't there early on. So to explain that, obviously in Ottawa government, there's federal, right? And so federal, we had a federal team of engineers that are specialists on their particular area. So we have like enterprise networking, security, data center, and each of them would work with SSC on that particular area. And so whenever there's RFPs, those SCs would work with that customer, build a relationship with the customer, and help influence the RFP in terms of the wording. Yep. Yes.
Just to clarify, SSC, for those who don't know, is like the IT department of the government in Canada. Is
Yes.
that an
Exactly.
accurate description? Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, keep going.
So yeah, we would have a whole team dedicated for SSC because they bring in high amount of revenue, and so the idea to be successful there in federal is to be able to build a strong enough relationship with the government and basically position your solutions as a solution to their projects, and then help influence the RFPs where you can show some of the capabilities as differentiators that you have over other vendors, and then from there, so the battle is won before the RFP comes out. If the
Yeah.
RFP comes out and you're aware, that's an indicator that you probably lost. And there's so many like smaller departments within broader SSC that like it's a beast, right? And that's why we had a lot of resources assigned. I was mainly in municipal government, so I covered municipal government, and I covered Crown Corp organizations. So it was kind of more for me. It was less. There was some RFP obviously for municipal government, but the Crown Corp was almost like a commercial account where they would have projects and they would make decisions. So I was kind of in between. I was in public sector, but with municipal government and Crown Corp, there was some commercial element to it that was not like federal. So
And again, for Crown Corp, it's basically an entity that is like operates on its own, but in the end, someone reports back to the government, right?
exactly,
But they can kind of deal with themselves as if they're a private corporation
exactly,
within
exactly,
guidelines. Not fully, but within guidelines. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So it was fun to work with them because I could position something. I would build a relationship with them, position a solution, and immediately they'd make the decision, and versus having to go through like a long RFP process and
Yeah.
writing it all out. It was a breath of fresh air for sure.
Have you ever rejected to do an RFP, to respond to an RFP?
Um, when I was, this takes me back probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. Um, I don't think I have personally. But I have chosen not to put more resources in certain RFPs, knowing that
Right.
we had a lesser chance of winning. But
Right.
I haven't not responded to it.
Yeah.
Like it did, yeah.
I was just talking like I created a video a few weeks ago, and part of the video was like, hey, what is your RFP process? And one of the first decisions people have to make is whether they respond to one or not, right? Because
Yeah.
especially if they have limited resources, if it's a startup with one SE and they're getting an RFP that's obviously a losing RFP, should you respond to it? But then again, if it's a company like Cisco and you guys have resources, did you have to do the RFP yourself or did you have an RFP team?
I would have resources helping me, not necessarily an RFP team, but specialist team. So if it was a particular area, I would always do the first crack at it, but there'd be questions that I wouldn't be able to answer. So I would leverage my specialist to be able
Yeah,
to.
but it's your responsibility to get it
My
done.
responsibility. Yes,
Get it
my
done. Who does it is a completely different story.
100%. The
Right.
generalist owns that RFP for sure.
Okay. All right. And you mentioned you had at one point you had 2 customers when you were with like the enterprise,
Yes.
and now you have 10 customers with whatever that sector is called right now. Something select, commercial select. Is that what it's called?
It's called enterprise in Google, but the Cisco terminology would probably be commercial select.
Okay. Okay. So what's the difference between supporting 2 customers only and supporting 10 customers?
Um, with the two customers, it is a very, very close relationship, and a lot of times you have to be on site multiple times a week, at least once, sometimes multiple times a week. You're more ingrained with that organization. You have deeper relationships, like uh, uh, bottom up, but there's just more of those. You're just really locked in. You know the projects that's going on. There's more responsibility. Your eggs are all in kind of one basket type of thing. So you just I just find myself spending more time on site and developing a tighter, and actually the one thing also is I learn about their business in an in-depth way. Um, so I learned very deeply about their business and where we can add value. And as an enterprise architect, systems architect, I try to look at what they're trying to do and how we can implement technology. So it's more of like a business systems engineering role versus more of a technical systems engineering role when you have more customers. You it's more of like a business architect. At least I found I was more of that than purely technical because I had a lot of resources, and that's the thing when you have those large accounts, you get a lot of resources as well, and that's something that I wasn't used to until I joined enterprise. So we had a
Like,
lot of resources.
like, what do you mean by resources?
So specialists, we got more resource support from PM because it's the largest customers that we're spending. So uh, anything I needed, I could get what I want. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, so I wanted to clarify because when people say resources, some might think of like books or websites or training, but no, it's people. Like
people.
everyone's invested in your success there. Um, did you feel like you have a lot more power when you were covering smaller companies?
100%, 100%. And I would have more people reach out to me, hey, like, we think this customer is would be great for, our product. So I would have a lot, I would have a lot of people reaching out to me that never reached out to me before as well. So I felt that we had a lot more power.
Nice. Um, okay. So you went from Cisco, which is mostly a physical networking company, right? It may work in the data center, but it's not known for cloud, right? Into
Yeah.
a pure cloud play.
Yeah.
How did you like what made you interested in cloud to begin with, and then how did you learn it?
Yeah. Great question. When I graduated from Carleton in Ottawa, my North Star was always Cisco. And Cisco was always my North Star. And it was always like, how do I get into Cisco? And as I continued to work within Cisco, it wasn't until COVID where I really took a step back and I really started to do market analysis. And I think what happened with COVID is it actually indirectly accelerated cloud because now engineers couldn't go to their data centers. That was affecting application rollouts. So we had a lot more customers move to the cloud. There was actually a senior director. So with one of my customers, one of the two customers that I had, that basically took me out for lunch and told me and said, I can see myself moving our crown jewel applications to the cloud. And that's when I really was like, whoa, I've never, and this was a financial institution, and I've never thought that cloud penetrated at the rate that it was being penetrated. So that really like like made me take a step back and understand the market and then look at kind of the opportunity and look at Gardner analysis and other analysis, and that's when I really started taking cloud seriously. And from there, I started to look at different cloud providers, and the one thing, and I started talking to multiple mentors. Anytime I make a big decision, I talk to at least 5 to 10 different mentors, from sales reps to systems engineers to consultants to architects, to people that were my instructors from back in the day as well. And and the one thing that everybody kind of said was, yeah, this is cloud is here to stay and everything's moving to cloud. And so I did my due diligence, and Google was definitely the best option for me. And that's kind of how I chose Google. I really like their technical solution. I really like the simplicity. I really like the solution approach versus a piecemeal approach. and that's kind of how I chose cloud. It was really based on that one customer conversation opening my eyes, and then doing research, and then how I chose Google was I felt that the platform was the best that I've seen.
To clarify, that meeting with the customer wasn't like he wasn't guiding you to say like, hey, you should look at cloud. He was just warning you that, hey, Cisco's like, you're
Your
gonna
time
lose
is
some
numbered.
business from us.
Your time is yeah, your time is
But
numbered.
okay,
It was an honest conversation, and at that time I needed that honest
and
conversation.
dude, like just from an SE perspective, I love the fact that you built a good enough relationship so that you go to lunch with a director. It was a director,
Senior director, yeah.
senior director, and like sometimes we talk about, oh, we're trying to extract information. A lot of customers just willingly give you information because you've developed a great relationship with them, and it's a partnership. Like you mentioned, you're kind of an extension of their team.
Yeah.
So so they give you information. They want they're interested in your success as much as you're interested in yours from and theirs, just from a human perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was huge for me. Like I said, I never thought of anything. I have, it's almost like there was no, like, cloud didn't really exist in my kind of space, right? Because I had the blinders on and just looking straight, but then that removed the blinders on and made me just open up to other things, and so that's what really drove that decision.
What technology were you selling at the time for Cisco?
I was a generalist, and so I was covering everything. So collaboration, security, data center, enterprise networking. My biggest concern was data center,
Yeah,
because if the apps are moving there, then that limits the data center business. And I think that's what he was referring to more than the security and the collaboration. It
yeah,
was like, and that's what we're doing the most with them. They built their data centers on, our on Cisco boxes at the time. So that's what he was referring to as the data centers.
right. Was it a big leap in like technical knowledge to go from on-premise data centers to online or cloud-based data centers?
Most of the concepts were similar. So for networking, you need DNS. There's IP address subnetting. There is VPNs. The technology is similar. I would say it's a lot easier in the cloud. It's removed a lot of complexity, and just being able to stand up things very quickly, a lot more efficient, a lot easier, and a lot less time to production. Typically, I would see customers bring an app like, it'll take them like a month to 2 months, or maybe a couple more months to bring an app to production in their data center. Whereas in cloud, it's within minutes, right? If you know what you're doing, if you allocate a subnet for that application, if you allocate the storage, and so for me, the transition wasn't as hard because it was easier. It was similar concepts. There's VMs, there's storage, there's networking, but it was an easier approach. I would say the VPC kind of took me a while to wrap my head around, and some of the services. Like I had no familiarity with like Kubernetes. I
Yeah,
wasn't exposed to that in Cisco, so there was a learning curve for some of these additional services, including data, ML, AI. All this was a bit more new to me.
right.
But from a networking infrastructure perspective, it's a similar concepts, except it's automated, it's quicker, and it's easier, in my opinion.
Okay. So this is not a cloud-based podcast. We don't really discuss that, but I'm interested in some of the things. When you say like they would spin up an app in minutes, like the code already exists. You're saying like in a data center, even if the code already exists and they know exactly what they want to install, they still need a few months to be able to actually bring it up. Whereas in the
Exactly.
cloud, they can do it in minutes.
Exactly. And part of that is a people thing, because you need the VM team, you need the network team, you need the security team, you need the
Yeah,
storage team, you need them all to come together, you need the networking to do what their job is, you need the security to provide the firewall rules. And so part of it is a people thing, maybe even more than process, but there are more steps, and
well,
that doesn't change in cloud,
even
but
hardware. Like you
yeah,
have to order the
hardware.
order
That's
the
the
hardware. Just during COVID, order the hardware. That's years at
exactly.
this point. Okay.
Yeah. Lead times was crazy, yeah, for sure.
So I'm happy to hear that there's a lot of overlap between what you knew and what you had to know at Google. But for the technologies like Kubernetes that you didn't know, did you have to learn it? Did you learn it before you moved on, or did you move on and then learn it?
I learned it before I moved on. So I studied for the professional cloud architect, which is like the second level. The best way to explain it is for Alcatel certs, it wouldn't be the NRS1, it would be the NRS2 level, but from a cloud architect perspective. And I chose that specifically. I didn't choose the networking engineer or the security engineer. I chose the architect because I really wanted to understand the full like architect, like from the databases to the storage systems to the infrastructure VMs, the networking. I wanted to fully understand how the cloud architecture looks like. So
Right.
I took various Udemy courses. I started whiteboarding on my own. I started speaking to other cloud architects, validating my knowledge, and yeah, it took me a couple months. I ended up passing the PCA of Google, the Professional Cloud Architect, before I even started the role. I had a strong enough knowledge of Kubernetes and other areas, including serverless, that before I even started the role.
So Google Professional Cloud Certificate. What's it
Cloud
called?
Architect, Google Professional Cloud Architect,
Cloud Architect. Okay.
CA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you compared it to Nokia certifications, which I don't think anyone knows. So Cisco certification would be like CCNP.
CCNP. It would be the
Right.
CCNP. Yeah,
Okay.
CCNP. Yeah,
And I'll leave a link to that certification for Google in the show notes as well for anyone who's interested in doing it. So Udemy, you did a bunch of stuff basically, whiteboarding. What did you whiteboard?
I wanted to whiteboard a global application. So I wanted to understand how the load balancer works, how the different regions work, how the VPC concept work, and how they would communicate with each other. How like you can do URL mapping, and so I took the global application because I thought that it was the most complex that I can think of. And I wanted to understand the backend, right? How the database works, why choose specific databases
Yeah.
over the other, the
See,
storage. Yeah,
I'm trying to learn all that. I gotta admit I'm doing the AWS, not the Google certificate, so don't hold it against me. Um, but a lot of times I'm just having a hard time. It's like why I never used a database in my life, right?
yeah,
I've never looked at storage other than for my computer, right? SSD, whatever. So looking at it right now, I am struggling. I'll admit that. Like, why are we? Why would I pick a relational database versus a non-relational database? Why do I even know these terms, right? And like for AWS specifically, they support a billion. Like even when you were at Cisco, your customers probably have MongoDB, they had Postgres, they had NoSQL. How do they make that decision? And now as a customer engineer, you're gonna have to guide them to which one they need to use.
yeah,
Did you
exactly.
did you find that as well? Okay.
Yeah, I database was definitely the hardest thing for me because like there was nothing I was doing in Cisco that I could bring that knowledge over.
Yeah.
I had to learn it from scratch. I built databases. I built tables. I did queries, SQL queries, and so that allowed me to like really better understand it. I did SQL dumps, and I was able and I did so I did a lot of hands on for the
Yeah.
database to really understand it.
And the thing about cloud is that there's a lot of you're basically taking everything that's in IT that used to be sold by different people. For example, the servers were sold by Cisco,
Yeah,
databases by some other company, firewalls by Cisco or whoever. But then you have a lot of other services that run on top of it.
yeah.
And now, as a customer engineer at Cisco, you have to know all of at Google. You have to know all of it. So now, as a generalist, how did you find the transition from Google something physical to cloud?
Hard, very hard, very hard. I was in the generalist CE role in Google for a year and a half before I transitioned to the networking specialist. But that was probably one of the hardest roles I was a part of because it's not just like infrastructure, right? It goes into like Kubernetes and app modernization. It goes into data analytics. It goes into ML and AI. So very quickly, like the conversations, and these guys are smart. They're specialists in their area.
Yeah.
These are enterprise customers. They could feel, if you're not speaking their language. So it was hard. It was hard. And me being a technical CE or SE, however you want to call it was hard for me. It was challenging because I realized that I had to be more I wouldn't say a project manager, because I was still helping to architect the overall solution, but I had to take a step back on the technical side, bring in folks that really knew, would were really specialists in that area, and at times that was hard for me. In Cisco, like, everything is infrastructure, so I can have a deep enough conversation across the board. Maybe not collaboration, but across the board I can have a deep enough conversation. But in Google, that's just not for me. That was not possible.
Okay. So one thing I want to say, you mentioned this earlier, and I want to highlight it, is that when you had two customers, you needed to know the customers more than you needed to know the product.
Yes, absolutely.
And I find this specifically true for generalist SEs in general, except for, like, commercial, transactional, small to medium business SEs. If we know the customer, if we know their business, even if we're not experts in technology, it makes our life easier. But if we're expert in technology, then we don't know the customers at all, we can't help. Do you find it? Do you agree, disagree? Any other comments before we move on?
100% agree. Yeah, in enterprise, like when I was at enterprise in Cisco, like I knew so much about their business. I knew more about their business than probably anybody else in Cisco. Like trading, financial institutions, and that's how I started getting into, like, one of my interests. I started getting into, like, understanding fundamental analysis for stocks, and doing technical analysis, and understanding, like, how an exchange works, was from, covering one of the customers was a trading exchange company. So it's super interesting, right? Like, latency in microseconds or nanoseconds makes a difference in terms of who owns the market in hedge fund, in trading companies.
Yeah.
So you need to know the business to be able to leverage, your technology. But in other areas, it's like you cover so much customers that it's almost like not a reactive model. You should still know a certain amount of level of their business, but it's more like, you want to be able to support them, you want to be able to provide the right solution, and it's you have less time to know about each individual
Yeah.
business.
So, like, here's a piece of advice. If you're an SE and you don't enjoy meeting people or building great relationships, then small to medium businesses, if you're always like that new customer smell, like, that's, if you want to call it that, then small to medium business is your thing. If you want to build relationships and really know customers deeply, enterprise, the larger customers, that will be better for you. And that I'm curious at this point. So you were sales systems engineer, then you became a consultant systems engineer, then back to, you were enterprise system architect, but that's just a senior SE.
Exactly. Yes.
Why did you, and then you went customer engineer at Google, and now specialist again?
Yeah.
Why are you switching?
That's a great question. Each individual situation is different. So when I was first a systems engineer, I was in that role covering Canada municipal government Crown Corp for just under 3 years. And for me, being a more technical person, I wanted to go into, I wanted to be a consulting systems engineer. There was really no opportunity in Ottawa at the time. We had one guy for each architecture. They were amazing, and there wasn't a big enough market. So I moved to Chicago to be a consulting systems engineer. And so when you become a specialist, you cover more customers. So you travel a lot more. So I was traveling 30, 40 to 50% of the time. And then my daughter was born, and that changes things. Anybody that has kids definitely knows, it changes things a lot. And so when my daughter was born, within a few months, I switched roles because I realized I was traveling way too much, and I realized that it wasn't going to work. And so I was able to leverage, my success and be able to get right into a senior SE role based on, my performance as a consulting systems engineer. It was perfect for me because I could stay in Chicago and focus on my Chicago-based customers, and then also I could build deep strategic relationships. And so that's when I was an enterprise systems architect. And then that's when I talked about where I did market analysis and I saw the push to cloud. So I went to being a pod CE in Google, and I did that for about a year and a half. And like I said, it was challenging. It was very, very challenging. And at that time in my area, there was no network specialist. We didn't have a central network specialist role. So a year and a half into me being a pod CE, I saw that role open up, the first network specialist that covers central. And so immediately I was like, you know what? I can add a lot of value in this position because I know the cloud side, I know the on-prem side, and I know the net. Like I'm strong in networking. So I was like, there's very few people that can probably do all three, unless they're from Cisco or unless they come from other networking on-prem backgrounds. But most people that I worked with are more like data focused, right, on the Google side.
Yeah.
So I immediately jumped at the opportunity and became a network specialist. And I think I'm happy now. I'm happy in my current role because I could be technical and I'm a technical person. I don't feel like I'm overwhelmed in a lot of meetings and at the same time I cover so many different customers, so I learn different environments and it's fun for me. So yeah, there's personal reasons, but there's also strategic reasons why I made each of my moves.
There's never one reason to take a job, right? It's a usually a combination of things. But you mentioned as a consultant SE, you were traveling all the time with Cisco, and now you're kind of a consultant SE, right? That's not your title, but that's the same role, but
Yeah.
you don't travel.
Yeah.
So even the same role within two different companies, one could be travel heavy, and the other one is not.
Way different, yeah.
And so I'm thinking about this. No one buys networking from Google, right? If someone buys from Google, it's for some other reason, and networking is just something they have to do to get whatever it is that they want done. Versus, like, I think you were a consultant SE for SD-WAN.
Yeah, I covered specifically Meraki, so I covered SD-WAN, but I also covered other cloud like security and cloud switching and wireless. Everything within the Meraki BU.
So I guess my question is, how is it different from going from selling an end to going now to selling a means or helping customers decide a mean, right? Like networking is a means to an end within GCP, whereas Meraki was an end, right? So just I'm curious about that.
There are a couple of differences. So like when I was in Cisco, I had a sales rep with me, a specialist sales rep, that I had their quota and I was driving revenue and I was selling with them. In my current role, I don't have a sales rep associated with me. So from a selling perspective, the dynamic is a little bit different. My role, I look at myself as an enabler, right? So every single service in Google, GKE, Cloud Run, Compute Engine, there is going to be a networking component to it. You're gonna meet me somehow. If you deploy Google Cloud, somehow you're gonna meet me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like your role. Like generally speaking, you're not going to get involved unless the customer is really interested.
Yes.
Right, because usually the generalist SE is selling whatever service or the architecture, and now the customer just has questions about networking and how it works, and that's where you come in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the sale is almost done, and you can come in and either just stamp it or ruin it.
Exactly.
No pressure.
Exactly. And a lot of times though, you're right, but sometimes they just want to do a POC in the cloud, right?
Okay.
And so that's where you want to make sure that their experience is a good experience. So a lot of customers, they don't just make a decision without at least having like one app in the cloud or um, doing some level of testing. And so that requires an onboarding, getting them onto the platform. That requires, either a VPN or internet connect set up. So that experience helps also in the sales cycle in the sense that it helps in the POC. So I would say I'm more in the POC side of things, technical POC side of things versus actually selling. But it is a differentiator as well. So there are some customers that actually do sell networking as a differentiator in terms of like how we're different than the other providers in terms of the global VPC and in terms of some of our advantages. So sometimes I will present, but it's tied into our platform versus a box that I'm selling.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some features that will make or break a deal. Like if you don't support multi-autonomous, whatever it's called, if you don't support multi-zone or something like that, that could ruin a deal. But generally speaking, that's not the first thing they talk about, right?
100%. Yeah.
And I love, man, they're even like the thing about love about sales engineering, it's different everywhere, right? If you're if you're a software engineer, you're a software engineer wherever you go. If you're an SE, it could be anything at this point. So I love learning about that from you right now.
Yeah.
So one thing we talked about earlier is you had a bad experience with a salesperson at one point.
Yeah.
Can you run me through what happened and how you solved it? Because I think
Yeah,
it helped a lot of people.
No, definitely. So as I was transitioning from the SC role in Canada to the US and in the consulting systems engineering role, I had various sales reps during that time when I had that consulting systems engineer role. And there was this one sales rep that I did struggle with, right? And part of the reason I was coming into the role brand new, and part of the reason was we weren't doing good sales wise. It was a growing product, but at that time it didn't have, I would say, the stamp that it has now, right? Meraki is huge in Cisco, but at that time, Meraki was kind of like the little brother, right? And so there was some sales pressures and challenges that we were facing. And for me, there were situations where I flat out, felt disrespected. And I think we talked about it in our previous 4 or 5 years ago, because I was fresh off that, experience, and I wanted to share that. But there was some situations where I'm with a partner and I'm asking sales related questions and I'm told to mind my own business, right?
In
And,
your
and that's,
lane.
I think, stay in my lane, right? A lot of that, and in terms of asking me a technical question and then having to Google it to verify that is that the right answer, right? So it's a lot of those I would say aggression moments which added up. And so I was only with this person for a short period of time, so I never really approached it. At that time, I told you that's one of my biggest regrets was I never got to fix it. Because for most relationships, I was able to fix it and have a good, strong relationship that was positive, right? But that one relationship, it ended without me really voicing my opinion, and that's because I was coming into a new country, coming into a new role. I was coming into a lot of new things, and I didn't feel that, and I was coming into a new relationship, so I didn't know this person, and I didn't know how they would react if I gave them the feedback, right? And the one thing all sales engineers need to know, and sales reps, is it's a small world. It's a small world. We're gonna somehow meet each other, again. And so what was interesting was when I was in the enterprise systems architect role, my sales rep left, and we had an opening for a sales rep, and turns out this person, was going for the role, and my manager asked me my opinion, and I said, before, I want to have a conversation with this person before we really legitimately, consider this person, right? Because I do want to, have a conversation. So I reached out to the person, and I had a conversation, and I was very, like, flat out honest. I said, this is how I felt. We worked together for 6 months. These are the 3 different instances where I felt extremely disrespected, and I just want you to clarify, like, from your perspective, because I only have my perspective. Number one, do you remember those moments? And number two, you know, why did you do those things, right? And so the funny thing was that, the sales rep said, I remember every single of those moments. And so I said, why? Why would you do that? And then the sales rep first apologized and said, I've never had this conversation with the sales engineer. She said, you're the first person that ever brought this up to me. So for that, I apologize. For that, I'm appreciative, and I apologize for it. And the sales rep mentioned that at that time, there that this person was under a lot of pressure, and my questions was making that person feel like I was undermining this person, right? That I didn't trust their sales acumen, and that I was undermining that with pressures in terms of sales processes, that with partner pressures, that with management pressures, was the reason I got exactly what happened, right? But she said that's still not an excuse, and I apologize for that. And I just said, wow, like I appreciate that. I promise you, I wasn't trying to undermine you. I just want to be a partner, right? I want to know the sales side of things, so I can have the proper context when I'm in front of customers, and I don't make mistakes that will put my foot in my mouth, right? And even when you asked me technical questions, I gave you the answers because I feel like it's a true partnership, right? I feel like a sales rep and an SE is a true partnership. There shouldn't be one the technical side is only the SE. Obviously, you lead that, and obviously you run that, but um, you should be able to ask questions and be able to kind of collaborate on the commercials as well as on the technical side. So I said, listen, I'm happy for you to be on my team. Thank you for clarifying this. And what happened was this person ended up it wasn't I was out of my control. It was the her manager that made the decision for her to be on an account. But I was more than open, and I told my manager I think we should hire this person now, and this person did very well on our team, and now is a manager, and I have extremely good feelings about it. After that, I was able to have that conversation. And one thing somebody told me, and it really stuck with me, is the best advice that I could give to SEs. One uncomfortable conversation can take you further in a relationship than 100 comfortable conversations. And even with customers as well. I've had some of those moments with customers where it was a little bit of an uncomfortable situation, but you'll go so much farther in the relationship. There'll be trust built, respect built, and that's something I didn't know early in my career.
I like that. So I guess so. I love the way you dealt with it after the fact. But now, if you work with new salespeople, what do you do to make sure that whatever happened with her or him doesn't happen again?
I guess for me now is just transparency and understanding of expectations, and understanding that I like to know the commercial side. I'll ask you questions, but don't take offense to that, because I like to know that side of things. I want to understand the partner strategy. Why are we choosing this partner over the other? Because then now when I'm working with them, I can have that context, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not just a one trick person that just focuses on technology, right? And so I established that earlier on, built that, and a lot of people love that. A lot of people respect that, and a lot of people want that more than someone that just kind of
Yeah.
stays in their lane.
Well, there's a big shift, right? Like sales engineers of the past, even of the current, who've been doing this for a long time, they're under the impression that they're just technical people who are there to answer technical questions. And that's what some salespeople think of as you're just there to answer technical questions when they come up. Right? And there's a shift right now where sales engineers are business solutions providers, right? We're solving business problems. We cannot solve a business problem without asking business questions.
100%.
So I love that. And I love the fact that when you talk to people now, you set the expectation ahead of time. It's like, hey, I will be asking commercial questions. And the thing I would add is, I would say, like, because this is how it will help me do my job from the technical aspect. And usually whenever someone says because, you heard the research where there's a big lineup for photocopying or something, or coffee, and someone walks in and says, can I cut in? They say no. But if someone says, can I cut in because I'm in a hurry, they let them in, or her.
I haven't heard of that, but I generally will follow that philosophy. If they give me a reason, I'll let them.
Yeah, but like it could be a stupid reason, like because I'm in a hurry, because everybody else in the line is not in a hurry, right? But just because if they add because I'm something, they let him in. So that's something we can do as well as sales engineers. So Mohammed, we're about to move on to the not so fire round. I've been loving this conversation and I don't want it to end. So I'm gonna give you a minute right now. Is there any questions you were hoping I was gonna ask you, which I did not?
I would say the only thing that I would say is, and this is like me being 9 years in, of like things I like and things I don't like about the SC role. I would say that's probably the only thing. And I'm happy to kind of answer that, if that's okay, if we have time.
Which one? Things you
What
don't
I
like?
like about what I like about the SC role, and what I
Yeah.
don't. I can
Well,
focus on
the
what I
first
don't.
question, of the not so fire round is, what do you love about sales engineering? So
Okay,
here,
got it.
let's jump into the not so fire round. It is not so fire round, so you can take your time and
Okay.
answer the question: what do you love / not love about sales engineering?
One thing I love about engineering is the relationships. So there are some customers that I've worked with that we've become friends. They've invited me to their home. They've asked me to mentor, their kids, and I think that's the biggest thing. And not only with the customers, but within the SEs, with the SE community, um, comparing notes, sharing, wins and learning from each other. those relationships are amazing. I think that's one of probably the best thing I like about it, about the SE role, is because I can always learn from a sales engineer a different perspective, and also learn from my customers and grow. And I feel like I grow with my customers. The more complexity I see from my customers, the more market knowledge I'm gaining. So it's like naturally it helps me there as well. So I would say
Yep.
that's probably the number one thing. I love solving problems. I've learned that I love the business side of things and learning about the business. I didn't know that about myself, but I truly enjoy learning about the business, and reading 10K reports, earning reports, seeing what's top of mind to the executives. I didn't care about that before, and I never wanted to delve into that. But now since I've delved into that, I like it. I would say those are probably the two top things that I like: solving problems and the relationships.
Okay. What is it that you dislike about it? This is not part of the not so power, but just
Oh, no, no worries, no worries. I would say early in my career, there are a couple of things. Obviously feeling like maybe you don't belong as a SE, feeling the imposter syndrome, because it's magnified, right? Like you're in big meetings, sometimes you're presenting to the CIO, and if you have a bad meeting in your first or second year, which I did, like it really stuck. I took it home, and I really, like it really, it was tough. It was tough to bounce back and feel like I could do this. I would say that's number one. And then early on in my career, there's a lot of politics, right? When you're early in your career in the sales engineering, the sales reps are not all coming on a line to work with you, right? And so having to prove yourself, but not getting the opportunity to prove yourself, I think that's where sometimes it becomes a challenge. But I was fortunate; I had a strong manager that's like, nope, he's working on this, and he knows his stuff, and he has a plan, and so I've always had that support. But always feeling earlier on, I always felt like, hey, if I make a mistake or something goes wrong, then I'm gonna get at it. I'm not gonna be working on this account, right? So that part was hard as well. It was like that politics that I didn't that was hard for me a little bit. So those two things were probably the top two.
yeah. No, I get that. Like yeah, politics sucks. I've never actually answered this question for myself, but you brought something up like about building relationships. The hardest part about sales engineering for me is building relationships with people I don't like.
Mm.
I don't know if you've seen the same thing.
That it's definitely quite a challenge.
How do you do it?
I'll give you a situation, an example. So I was working with this one customer. It was a strategic customer, and everybody, like most of the guys from this account, they loved me. But this one person asked my sales rep to remove me out of the account, and really didn't give a reason, right? And so I said, you know what? Let me just address it head on. So I was coming on site more. I asked to take this person out to lunch, was refused every time, was asked to I tried to ask the person's reports on what are some of the challenges that you're seeing with us, just trying to get any information, and I wasn't able to get any information. And so for this situation, the sales rep actually went to my manager and asked for me to get pulled out of that account as well, which was a double tough situation. And I just showed my manager kind of my plan on how to grow this account, and showed the manager that I was coming in twice a week, and these are all the relationships that I've been building, and I was able to stay with that account and grow that account. But I was never able to resolve it. And I think what I've learned is control what you can control, do the right thing, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Don't necessarily force it, because you can only
Yeah,
do so much, and there's things that are outside of your control that can impact that relationship, right?
yeah.
So
Just to be clear, you built great relationships with everybody else from that customer side.
yes,
That's just one person who just didn't like you,
exactly, yes,
right? But
yes,
you built champion, like the things that you can control. You built champions
yeah,
that can defend you to their bosses from other. Yeah,
yes,
I've had that situation where a customer just does not like you for one reason or another, right? Or doesn't like the product. And you know what? You're not going to win every deal, right? You're not going to win every customer, but you can do things like what you just did to not go around them, but basically build a base, build a foundation within that customer. I love that. Mohammed. That's amazing. I like how you did that. All right. So question number 2 of the not so fire round is, what would you think is your superpower?
Let me think. That's a good let me think about this. What's my superpower? Oh, I think I know. So when I look at the deals that I've won and that I've been a major contributor, I really think that sales engineers should do this a lot, is go over and beyond um, to win the deal. And I'll give, maybe if we have time, I can give an
Yeah, go ahead.
example.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Um, and I really think that if people do this, you'll win more deals. So um, I was working with a automotive company, right? And they had issues with their manufacturing plant, and they saw that 70% of the issues was the network, and network stuff was going down, and it was affecting them making cars, and ultimately affecting them from earning revenue and lost revenue. It was giving them it was hurting their lost revenue. So they gave us a plant, and they said, hey, if you show your technology and show how you can solve the problem, then what's it called? Then we'll give you this win, right? And so what happened was, a week before, I thought I can go into the plant, help set it up, but a week before the start of the POC, they said for security reasons we can't allow you in the plant. And so they gave me a month to make this POC successful without me physically being there. And there was a physical component. We had to install 120 switches, set up the network management tool. You're on mute. Sorry.
I'm on mute. That never happens. So for a POC, 120 switches.
Yes, they wanted us to power that whole plant, and that plant had 120 switches,
That's
and
an
all
expensive
this
POC.
in a month. Yes, it was an expense. And they were willing to spend a lot of money with us, so we were okay with doing that expensive
Okay.
POC. So what I did was, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, right? I can't rely on the partner. There's a physical component. There's stacking cables, power, whatever. So I ended up building like a guide, right? That showed screenshots of the equipment, showed the steps, physical steps, stacking cables, went into the configuration from, IP addressing, anything you can think of, like and multiple screenshots of the networking dashboard. And with my document, they were able to get 120 switches up and running in 2 weeks. And we were able to make the deadline, and we were able to make the win. And so the partner was super supportive of us, and the partner was actually more strategic with the customer than we were at that time. And so the partner had a big say, and giving that partner the white glove treatment for them to do it on their own, and just giving them a document to kind of walk them through everything. They liked us, the customer liked us. And so like sometimes it's like for a POC, yeah, you could do the minimum, but if you go the further, and this is one lesson that one SE manager told me, people buy from people. People don't buy from products.
Yeah.
So if someone feels that they can trust you, even though you might not be the top one, two, three in that particular area, a lot of times they'll go with you.
Yeah.
And I think me, like I try to go, not all, like I try to be strategic as well. There's certain deals where, I'll do it more. It's a big logo. It's a massive opportunity. But I feel like me going over and beyond, I think that's probably one of my superpowers.
So just to be clear, generally speaking, you wouldn't have built that document.
No, no,
You would have went on site and done everything. But even a lot of SEs maybe would not have built that document and said, hey, when you get it, you should already know how to do it because it's easy. It's a switch. It's like everything else. Call me and I'll log in and I'll help you configure it. Right.
yeah.
That's how one SE could have done it. Well, I love the fact that you did that way. And the other thing about buying from maybe the third best vendor. I was talking to a client yesterday who was buying equipment from, looking to buy a specific product from one vendors between two different people, and they knew the first and they loved the product, but they bought from the second simply because they addressed their problems. The
Okay.
first one was pushing the product, the second one addressed their problems.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I like that. All right. Question number 3 is there a book or resource you would recommend for anyone trying to break into cloud or trying to be an SE or want to be a better SE?
Um, I'm one of those SEs that is not necessarily big on books, but maybe on the technical side, if you want to break into cloud, there is a resource called like a Cloud Guru, and I'm not associated to a Cloud Guru, but for me breaking into cloud, I really like that resource because it had training for like all cloud providers,
Yeah,
um, all certifications. And so it was one subscription and I can go into and just learn, right, and learn. And so I would say, I would say in the technical side, if you have it down, and I'm of the philosophy that SE should be have a certain level of technical ability.
yep.
I think for me, like if you're trying to pivot to cloud and go into sales engineering in the cloud, I recommend that resource to really get yourself up to speed, on those, like on the certifications, and you learn about the product, and they include labs, and so I'm a
Yeah.
big fan.
I love them. I'm using them. I'm using them right now. They even have a video or a course about the differences between the cloud providers, right? Like, because
Gotcha.
EC2 at AWS is cloud compute at Google, and
Yes.
something else at Azure, Blob or whatever. So now they compare the three in one video. So it's very helpful, I think. So I second Cloud Guru. Question number 4, not so fire around, Mohammed. Is there a habit you're working on today to improve in your personal or professional life?
Habit. I would say, like throughout my sales engineering journey, there was a lot of trial and error when I did things. Like when I first met a customer, I tried a specific approach, realized it didn't work out. So one thing I like to do is I like to standardize certain things. So like for example, when I meet a customer for the first time, I'm very standard in the approach that I take. I like to, number one, get a champion that's an executive, and also get a highly technical architect and meet them for lunch. And I asked the previous account team to make the introduction and make that appointment, because for me, the senior, that champion is going to help me with the projects, and then the engineer is going to help me get it done, right?
Yeah,
And so then I ask, what's the top three problems that you need, right, that you have, and then from there I built rapport, and then I have a certain cadence. So I try to standardize. I use trial and error and standardize on what works, and use that for certain things. For my POC, for meeting a new customer, I would say that's probably helped me the most, because I've made mistakes, and it's like you got to learn from it, and you got to use the data and get better. And that's, I think, what I've done. That there's a habit that I like is standardizing certain approaches on how I do things.
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that was the last question of the not so fire. Mohammed, if people want to connect with you, where can they do that?
Reach out to me through LinkedIn. I would say that's probably the best way. And let's talk. Let's talk. I'm happy to talk about sales engineering. I'm happy to talk about cloud, on-prem, and I'm happy to network. So super. I think the SC community is so like unique, and I love talking to other SCs or future SCs. And so it's yeah. Connect with me on LinkedIn.
All right. I'll leave your LinkedIn link. Can't speak, in the show notes. Mohammed, it was great talking to you. Um, I think one of the resources you didn't mention, you mentioned throughout the things, the conversation, is mentors. And I like that you have that. So
Absolutely.
catch you
Absolutely.
later. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And just the fact that this is a sales engineer or systems engineer at Google, and customer engineer at systems engineer at Cisco, and customer engineer at Google, even though they're the same role, different titles, same role, they're very different in how they go around doing the job. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys did. I hope you took something out of it. And if you have anybody else that you want me to talk to that you think will be useful to you, please let me know. I'm happy to chat with almost anybody. Almost. Being an introvert, I have to add that word. So that's it for me for today. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you. And I'm signing off.